This
customers.
conference will
Okay.
now be recorded.
Okay. Our vision is to advance quality and improvement throughout organisations based on the unique contribution of W. Edwards Deming and other like-minded thinkers. So thanks for your time to join. We aim to help you develop your quality knowledge and help you improve your business. Our agenda for today, first of all, a quick review of the committee members and elected officers of SIG. You will have received an invite to put your name forward to join the committee. If you do want to join our committee, and you share your contact details with Caroline through the membership part of CQI. We're going to review our achievements of 2020. We're going to look at it's coming undone, going backwards. We're going to view our achievements. We're going to have a look ahead into 2021 and beyond. Then we're going to have a presentation from Alan Clark titled Unlocking Big Value. Big quality, sorry. And lastly, we will have a little questionnaire. This is really about a supporting thing for our model of sustainable organisations, MOSO. And it'll ask you a few thought-provoking questions, which we will be able to do some analysis of, and it should help you also buy into the thought of the way MOSO can be used. Firstly, committee membership. Under the CQI rules, we're required to have 3 officers minimum. That's the chair, the deputy chair, and the secretary. These have been elected by the steering committee, and that was back on the 16th of February. And as I said just now, you have been invited. So if somebody wants to join, let Caroline know. These are our committee members. I'm chairman currently. I've got Kevin Leach, Peter Leeson. Peter Leeson appears twice because he's joined this year as well and has agreed to take on our secretarial role. Will, Terry, Alan Clark, Malcolm and Ray. New committee members are Chris Chinapoo, who joined us from overseas, and Angelique Macros Matavet, who was the quality. I'm sorry, Angelique, I can't remember what the title is. Quality Person of the Year for 2019.
Yes.
And the other thing I need to do is not just to thank the current team, because we've been together a long time, as you can understand. It's been very valuable to me, and everybody's put in a lot of work into what we do, and we've had some very good stuff produced. And one of those who left us this year was Frank Selzik, who he left us this year and he's been with us 2 or 3 years, I think, from memory. And we're sorry to see him go, but thank you also for your efforts, Frank. What do we manage in 2020? Well, it was a bit of a problem, as you probably all know. We were used to doing 4 one-day events through the year. We managed to get our first event in on the 5th of March. The title of that was Gathering Data for Evidence-Based Understanding and Improvement, and that was going to be a series of events through the year. We managed to get through the intros and parts of the Plan Do Study Act A3 report, which we were using as a foundation for that. But of course, all that came to a grinding halt. The end of that session, we looked at the problem with resistance to change and human failings. And because of the situation and because I was looking for more input, I shared some workbooks with the guys who'd attended the event, covering human failings as one of them and resistance to change, and was looking for some feedback on what people felt contributed to these aspects of our work. Because They're the things that make you as quality managers, your quality people, your life difficult. So face-to-face events came to an end, and we were forced into this situation, starting to learn some new skills, namely webinars. So we've established a list of proposed webinars for 2021, and the titles for these are listed here. It's taken us a while to pull these together because it's a whole new science for us. But we've done a lot of work on Taylorism, which produced a lot of interesting ideas, which might produce something like 10 webinars on its own. We also want to cover things like targets and KPIs, wisdom from numbers, SPC. And we've also, through Chris Chinapoo, started some interviews with people from the Deming Institute in America, which is Bill Bellows and Kevin Carhill. And we have some video that we're trying to prepare from those at this very moment. So, an update. Oh, sorry, previous presentations. Just as a reminder, what we've done over the last few years. We're talking today about MOSO, Model of Sustainable Organisations. It's available on the CQI website. You will see the links later on. And for the last 4 years, we've done a series of events around structured approach to improvement, delivering robust, sustainable workplaces, businesses or systems, and better quality, faster for less back in 2016. I'm not sure now, certainly whilst the delegates to those events were able to have a slide set in PDF format, and I'm not sure whether they still are available, but we can check on that if anybody's interested. So, the members update for 2021. How many members? You can see on the left-hand side there's a graph which shows our age groups and how many members we've got. This is prepared by Malcolm. Thank you, Malcolm. And our membership continues to grow. You can see that, I suppose it's no surprise that the biggest bulk of the membership is in the sort of middle range of employment. But what I'm heartened to see is on the graph on the right-hand side, where you can see our growing membership year on year is still continuing to grow. And if I'm really lucky, a little slide arrow will appear. Right. Something's gone wrong again. Anyway, we've got about another 120 new members during 2020, which I think is very impressive, bearing in mind we weren't meeting each other. People are still interested in what we do, so that's quite important to us. Will it move on, do you think? It won't go. It's locked up somehow. Oh, there's the arrow, it is there. 180 new members. Okay. Hopefully moving on. I seem to be locked up somehow. And I don't know what to do. If I stop sharing the screen. Right, okay. Let's see if that helps. There's a second graph. This slide 12 shows that our membership by gender goes up proportionally. So there's not really any change. We're not having a drive, I'm afraid, for new female members, but we do continue to get new members of both sexes. So that's a summary of where what we DemSig have managed to achieve in the last year, where we think we're going. There's an opportunity for you to put some questions in the chat thing on the right-hand side, which we can cover later on. And now the opportunity is to hear Alan Clark talking about unlocking big quality. And I'm going to try to let this go somehow. I don't seem to have enough screens.
That's fine, Alan, you're not sharing anymore. So Alan Clark, you should be able to share your screen now.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. So, improve or die. It's never been truer. Our world is changing faster than ever. Are you interested in knowledge to help you unlock sustainable success? That's socially, economically, and environmentally sustainable. Do you see? Hello, I'm Alan Clark. I am former founding chair of the Deming Special Interest Group, which, as Alan has said, was launched 20 years ago this month with our first meeting. Today, I'm going to share some ideas about unlocking big Q. So what do we mean by big Q or big quality? For me, it's about attaining sustainable success through a whole company approach to delivering ever better value to customers in a fast changing world. And today is inspired, as you would expect from a Deming Special Interest Group, by the work of Dr. Edwards Deming and others whose thinking is consistent with it. So I move on. So what's missing for you to unlock big Q? Just think about that for a moment, but moving on, I'm going to look at first a spectrum of quality. Business as usual in this quality spectrum is down at the bottom left-hand corner. The norm being for business as usual too often is D- and fail. Many organisations are able to maintain performance, including those who've got ISO 9000 and other quality standards. And beyond that are people who make a real habit of improvement, continual improvement, and using idea systems for individual improvement, personal improvement. But Dr. Deming was very strong on innovation. He felt that if you innovated and were lucky, you would succeed. And he was constantly advocating innovation. But let's just go back for a moment to business as usual. What if people want to improve product? Oh no, sorry, I missed the slide. Let's talk about Dr. Deming for a moment. A quick overview of his story. He was working in the Western Electric Hawthorne plant in Chicago in the 1920s, doing some research for his PhD. At the same time, although he never met him, was Dr. Walter Schuhart, who invented what we now know as statistical process control to improve the quality of the telephones that were being made by Western Electric. After Deming left having completed his PhD, Deming was introduced to Schuhart by a friend, and during the 1930s they worked together, and Deming helped Schuhart write his two books. During World War II, the work that they did was used to improve the quality of the military manufacturing. But at the end of World War, so there's Deming and Schuhart together, but at the end of World War II, the Americans forgot about quality, but Japan picked it up. Because Deming, because he was working in the Department of Census in the US, was invited to help the Japanese. And from that came an invitation to speak to the Japanese Union of Scientists and Engineers about quality. And there was this world-changing moment at Mount Hakone, in a hotel at Mount Hakone, when Deming was speaking about quality to people representing 80% of the manufacturing in Japan. And the rest, as they say, is history. Or rather, it took 30 years before the Americans woke up, when the competition for Japan was so strenuous. And a public sector broadcast TV program was produced called If Japan Can, Why Can't We?, in which Deming was featured. And from that day onwards, his phone never stopped ringing. The important thing to think about Deming is not just SPC, statistical process control, is to think about the emphasis that he placed on customer focus. The customer, he said, is the most important part of the production line. He went on towards the end of his life to publish what he felt was a more comprehensive view of management knowledge. He called it a system of profound knowledge, which was necessary, or deep knowledge, deep insight knowledge, which is necessary for the transformation of organizations to what we now call world class. The other thing to say about Dr. Deming was he was a lifelong learner. He was always taking notes, and even up to the end of his life. He passed away in 1993 and was on stage shortly before he passed away, and was still a learner. So let's just look at Deming's chain reaction. When people want to improve productivity in business as usual, often they start in the middle of this chain reaction doing cuts. Deming's chain reaction suggests that improving quality is the place to start, which will have these knock-on effects, as you can see in the chain reaction, that ends up with remaining in business and creating jobs and more jobs. Deming was very keen on helping with transformation to what we call now world-class. He came up with this idea of a system of deep insight knowledge based on 4 elements. I've called it here a 2020 vision of management knowledge that helps you transform. And I've used his words in a way that this is a lens for transformation. So I've extended the idea of the lens to represent the 4 elements of knowledge that he felt were critical. First was, these are published in his book, The New Economics. The first one is psychology. The second area is appreciation for a system. He was a systems thinker. And then there's knowledge about variation, bringing in SPC. And finally, theory of knowledge. Those who are familiar with higher education might recognize the term. I'm going to go in a little bit deeper than that, a bit more explanation to that. So maintaining the image there. The people, the psychology lens is about leadership. He was very, very insistent on leadership being critical to transformation of organizations. And psychology is also going to tell us about why people behave the way that they do. Systems thinking is not new, actually. If we go back to Leonardo da Vinci, who observed that everything's connected. And what we need to do is look at the biggest picture to understand all the relationships and interactions that are going on in our situations, and not get too lost in the detail. Of course, we talked about variation and SPC. This is science down here in this box. You should think science, an evidence-based approach. Proper analysis is using the statistical process control methodology. But the whole point about this, as it says there, is about decisions. As SBC world expert Don Wheeler says, the purpose of data is action. We use SPC to understand what's happening so that we can make better decisions. Finally, we've got knowledge. And using the Deming wheel, we can have an evolving understanding of what's happening in our the whole situation that our organization exists in. So let's just have a look at a bit more detail about the Deming wheel. A lot of you may know this as after the ISO 9000 as Plan, Do, Check Act. Deming was a bit scathing about check, because in America, for certainly, check means tick the box. And this is science. Let's be clear about this. This study is science. What is the evidence? What are the facts here? Now, psychologists will tell you that when they're working with people, that people are already and always and already in the middle of life. So what you need to do is often to start at study and find out what is happening. What evidence have you got, and have you analysed that evidence, possibly using SPC, to understand what's happening? Are there unusual occurrences? Is the system stable and predictable? Having understood the situation, you can then ask, why is it like that, and dig down and find the root causes, and then adapt or abandon those some changes as countermeasures to the underlying root causes of the problems. Really, in many ways, the Deming wheel ought to be thought of as the Deming spiral, because knowledge should be building on knowledge. And sometimes as you go round the cycle and hopefully increasing knowledge, you may have to, that's why I put in there amend, adopt and adapt, that sometimes what you try doesn't work. And you need to think of new approaches or from what you have learned. But when you do have an action, put it into a plan that tells people who should do what before whom, and then move on to implement the improvement and run it, ideally measuring it to get some factual evidence about what's actually happening, and then you're back to study again. So how can we put this into the context of the organization? If we go back to 2000, at the end of 2006, the Deming Special Interest Group was fortunate to have former Ford engineer and quality specialist Tony Brown, the late Tony Brown, who gave two wonderful one-day workshops on the transformation of Ford Motor Company in the 1980s, from making billions of loss to making billions of profit by the end of the decade. They then forgot it all and had to reinvent it all again at the beginning of the 2000s. So Tony was very strong in advocating that we found a way to convey Deming's work to people so that they could maintain the proper an effective way of working with improvement and innovation, which led to the development of what we called a model of sustainable organization. And it is a model because, as Gregory Bateson says, all models are wrong, some are useful. And we heard from a PhD study in Canada that in fact the model that we came up with, which we call MOSO, is probably one of only 3 in the world of this type. He was, of course, working on one of the other ones. He's on his own model. So just basically working on coming from Deming principles. So he said the most important part of the production line is the customer and its service delivery. So let's start looking at this model of sustainable organization, starting with the customer. The dotted line you see is to represent the interaction between all the elements in the model, because these boundaries are porous. The customers affect the organization, society is going to affect the organization and the customers, and so on. So here's satisfied customers. The focus should be the focus for the organization. Your operations are adding value for the customers. Adding value is the first part of daily work, and that adding value in daily work processes will draw on customer needs and draw on partners, perhaps for information or expertise, and suppliers, perhaps for contributing towards the beginnings of adding value. The second part of daily work is improvement and innovation, built around the Deming wheel. All of this is working. There are people working in the organization to do both adding value or supporting adding value and continual improvement and innovation. So we then added to the model this human element, which includes the people, the leadership and the management. And the interaction between the leadership, management and people is going to be the culture. All of this exists within societal influences, which one of the primary ones is attitudes towards learning. And all of that exists within the natural environment. And today, sustainability is a really hot topic, both of the environment and the organizations for that matter. Let's just look at in part 2 of daily work, the continuing improvement and innovation, and how it draws on on elements in the organization. Because the basic part 1 of daily work is adding value, but part 2 of daily work is the voices of the system, the voices of the customer, and the voices of the people, providing evidence for making decisions about improvement action. Too often, some or even all of these voices are ignored, sometimes to the detriment, well, often, usually when they're ignored, to the definite detriment of the organization. The voice of the people is one that should be foremost in people's mind after the customer, because the people working in the processes probably understand better than management what's going on. So consultation and dialogue is a really powerful element of daily work. All of this going around the Deming wheel is going to lead to changes in the system. Here we just from, it could be anywhere in the whole, the design and redesign could be anywhere in the whole system that's meant to represent, anywhere that is going to improve the outputs. But one of the problems with business as usual is that it seems to think that either cuts or targets are going to solve the problem. The only way you're going to improve a situation is by actually changing the system in some detail or other, or the whole system for that matter. I'm not going to go on for much longer on the model. If you want to find out more, if you go to our page on the CQI website, you'll find there's a 10-minute video which goes through and explains in even greater detail the model itself. So most of there is a challenge to management and leadership thinking at all levels. This, by the way, this can be used at every level in the organization, from the board to individual teams. And the idea there to being there to challenge existing thinking so that you can move on. Leaders of the whole organization or leaders of teams then get, and using MOSA, then get a fresh way to lead, a fresh way to look at the way the organization or the team is working. These new insights based on each of these elements hopefully will lead to sustainable success and long-term benefits. And by placing people on the diagram as we have here, hopefully this will lead to management and leadership providing more autonomy to people so that they're more engaged and stimulating their motivation to improve and be creative and find ways of making the organization more successful. So thinking about what's missing from your organization and your MOSO, there's some thoughts for you. Here we are again. So first of all, is your organization sustainable? Do you think it, because one of the sad facts, a few years back, the average age of a company in America was found to be about 15 years, and the average age of one in Europe was found to be about 12.5 years. So with the rapid changes in the climate and competition, perhaps it's even shorter these days. What would yours MOSO look like? That's a challenge. How could you apply MOSO to your organization, to your team, to your board, to the whole organization? And how about, do you have strategies for each element in here? It's all very well having a grand strategy, but do you have a strategy for each of the elements within MOSO? And just as a reminder here, is the common aim to serve the customer? Because at the end of the day, it's the customer that pays your wages. Finally, how can MOSO help you spot gaps, inconsistencies, or opportunities in your organization for improvement? Right, just comes as a sort of summary now. So the essentials of Deming's approach, supported by other thinkers as well. First of all, it's the customer focus. Without the customer, you're wasting your time. He was very keen on leadership. So what does your company leadership do? Do you actually have leadership? I know of organizations that I've seen who that just seem to think that they can do business as usual forever, and that is not true anymore. The pandemic surely has showed everybody that any moment there can be great change. People are the key to your organization. How are you supporting and developing your people? And beyond SPC is fundamentally fact-based thinking. Are you actually using evidence for your decisions? And reminder of systems thinking, everything's connected. And the unexpected can creep up on you at any moment, just like a pandemic, for example. And you don't know what effects that's going to have. Finally, what are you doing on innovation? Are you doing innovation in product, service, or processes? Have you found new ways to do what you do? So here's the final thought again: improve or die. And it's not easy to make these changes. It's not going to be an overnight job. And I think this quote from Arthur Ashe is very appropriate. You've got to start where you are. There's no use thinking you're going to have a massive change all overnight, because it won't happen like that. It's going to be incremental to start with. You may make innovative leaps, but you have to start where you are. Finally, I just for your information, here are 3 books that on Deming's thinking. Probably the most well-known is Out of the Crisis, But in '93, shortly before he passed, we had his the new economics, in which he expanded the system of profound knowledge, the 4 elements of knowledge required for transformation. And more recently, 20 years or more later, Dr. Ed Martin Baker, who worked at Ford Motor Company at the time Deming was helping them with their transformation in the 80s, Dr. Baker has come up with his further development, bringing his experience in Ford Motor Company and beyond to add some depth to Deming's work. So that's my presentation. So thank you very much. And I think we're going to be open to some questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed, Alan.
Thanks, Alan. So just looking through the questions, there's been quite a lot of interesting discussions being had. So let me just scroll up to our first question. Innovation delivers benefits and problems, such as those threatening our future and quality of life. How do we ensure that we take opportunities that are life-supporting and reject those that do not?
Is that to me?
To us,
Yes,
I think.
yeah, someone that has already got back suggesting risk management as a solution to that.
Yes, I think it's the starting point is leadership, and again, I've seen too many times that the lack of leadership. A client springs to mind, no names to back drill, where there I was in I observed something and shared it with senior management, and somebody said, "Oh, that shouldn't be happening. We issued a policy on that." Oh, when was that? Oh, 10 years ago. Actually, you have to take action. Leadership is action. And if there isn't the leadership there, then it doesn't matter what you do. And I think that people in more team leadership roles can do what they must be practicing leadership for the time when they become leaders of bigger operations. I don't think we're going to get anywhere without proper leadership. That's my view.
Thanks, Alan. Peter, did you have something to add?
Yes, so the question went on to how do we accept the good innovations and avoid them being badly used? And as far as I'm concerned, one of the big battles today remains the constant struggle between artificial intelligence and natural stupidity. Albert Einstein and others were extraordinary men who led to the creation of the atom bomb and the pointless second bomb being dropped on Japan. The first one would have been enough. The internet has been a fantastic development, and it's been used to create QAnon. And we have to live with the idea that brilliant inventions are open to be misused by people. And as long as we are dealing with people, you can watch out for it, you can do your best, but they will be misused. If there was no innovation, we'd still be living in caves. So it is absolutely indispensable to continue going. Just wanted to add that.
I think both of what you've picked up is the big side of that question, Ian Dalling's question. And there's a sort of a smaller side to that question, or is this business of talking to people, talking to your consumers, talking to your clients, talking to your customers, and understand what the deeply understanding, deep knowledge within an organization of what their activities are affecting. It doesn't stop us polluting the world with polystyrene, polythene, does it? And I was moved to think about, you know, this business about micro beads that people were businesses were putting in cosmetics and shaving foam and stuff like that. We didn't know. No, I didn't know that my shaving foam had micro beads in it. Would I not have bought it if I'd have known? It's a big step to understand what is hidden inside things that we use every day, but we need to go there. But a business shouldn't have pushed us. Into. If you went to a factory making microbeads and you're sticking it in, I don't know, aftershave or whatever it happens to be, or soap or something like that, something in your mind must say, blimey, O'Reilly, there's tons of the stuff there. Where does it go next? And I was moved to think about I can't remember, the guy was doing a review of things around the Mediterranean and walked up through Spain to see all the polythene sheet that is just buried, that's been used to cover fields and things to grow stuff under, and now it's being allowed to degrade and wash into the ocean. And the volumes of this stuff are just enormous. But it's not beyond people's knowledge to understand that's going to happen. We all know that polythene doesn't last forever. We know that stuff will be rotten, and we just accept the fact that it's just going to disappear somewhere. But our experts should be helping us understand what this means. And I think there's the big pressure, the societal pressures, and there's the technical pressures, and we have to understand. We have to do our best to understand this. And our business leaders need detailed knowledge of the decisions that they're going to make.
Thanks, Ellen. That leads us nicely on to, it's more of a comment, so I'd encourage people to scroll up, and I won't read all of it, but Victoria Tate, who I think has just left, but made a comment that sustainability is a massive topic, and there's a big focus on the circular economy at the moment, and has highlighted some specific questions to ask if you're in the business. So I'd recommend having a look at those. As I say, they're not direct questions, so I won't go through them. Had another question asking, how does the CQI model sit and relate to the MOSO model? So I presume that is the competency framework being related to. So governance, assurance, improvement, leadership and context. Does someone from the committee want to, how does the MOSO model relate into that? And does it?
Does any of our team want to pick that one up?
Well, let me, it certainly fits into the improvement section of the competency framework for me, but it's also bigger than all of them because it influences governance. The MOSO framework should be, when we created it, we created 25 papers that went with it, which are no longer available on the website. But the whole point is that the leadership of the organisation should be influencing the governance as well as the continual improvement. So I look at it as it's almost a lens. Well, it is. You could look at it as a lens through which to look at operations. On a more practical, from a more practical standpoint.
Yeah, and I think we could also CQI's efforts are now addressed at going deeper within the competency framework, isn't it? I think competency framework was a first step, and they're looking at new ways of explaining or encouraging thinking at more detailed levels within it. So I think they work quite well together. So
Perfect, thank you. So we've got quite a few questions coming in, so I'm just going to tie together some that are related to each other. So Keith has said, plastic is a major issue that will be with us for years, yet my recycling bin is increasing. So how do you change the financial culture over need to improve environmental needs? And then there's also another question relating to that of how could retail have learned from the Moto model and now be in a better position? So I think, how do you influence retail and the kind of financial culture to improve environmental needs?
Well, personally, I think it comes down to leadership again. Although you can't see the financial side, the economic elements on that as they are portrayed, it's very much, I think the financial side is very much like the your circulatory system, your blood flow system in your body. You can't see your veins through your body, but we know in what we've called your operations that the financial side is there. But if you focus purely on that and don't focus on the demand that should be being on your system from the customer, then you won't have any blood flow, you won't have any cash flow, you won't have any economics at all. I think that to just focus on the economics is too limiting. And we've seen that what's happened to the high street already before the pandemic. The retail was suffering. There's certain groups of what can I say without dropping myself in it, certain certain chains were already struggling before the pandemic came along, because the owners or chief executives were too focused on their bonuses or whatever, or the shareholders aren't buying anything, frankly. And when you look at somewhere like, I think on the other hand, if you look at something like Apple, who over the years have continually been innovating like mad and having a brilliant customer experience with their products, they're now the most valuable company in the world. So it sort of thinks, maybe focusing on innovating and giving great value to customers is the way forward, and that will give you payback on your financial side. If you haven't got a product development or service development strategy for the long term, then you can't expect to survive. And we've seen that the development of, I mean, certain high street, how can I put it, retail outlets have belatedly come to click and collect and even home deliveries that they weren't doing before, even though Amazon and Ocado and others were delivering. Other people were not doing it, and they had to come late to the party. So focusing on the customer and what I call the total customer experience is where the focus should be, and that will help your organisation survive and prosper. And
thanks, Alan. Peter, have you got something to add?
Yes, I wanted to point out that in the NOZO there is quite a lot about the voice of and listening, which I'm afraid if we listened a little bit more, we could have resolved a lot of these problems much earlier. It sometimes takes a Swedish schoolgirl to go and wake up the world about what we're actually doing and the rubbish we're getting into. But on the other hand, I gave a talk a few months ago for, I think it was for the BCS, as to why hadn't you planned for a pandemic? Because since the late 1990s, there have been many official government-led international test runs to find out what would happen. And the sample they used, or the example they used most frequently, exactly matched what COVID was doing. But the lessons were not learned. It was there, all the evidence was there. We knew this was going to happen, and we know it's going to happen again, and probably very soon. So it's really listen to the people, listen to the experts, no matter what the politicians tell us, listen to your customers, and not only your satisfied customers, listen to all the people who didn't want to work with you. A few years ago, there was a great sadness in the UK when HMV closed down. And I kept on thinking, wait a minute, HMV, that's the company that closed down all the local record shops. So they basically had done to them what they had done to everybody else. Listen and don't assume you're better than the others and that you have all the answers.
Yes, good point. Yeah. It's I think one of the interesting aspects of what Amazon has done to our retail industry, businesses found it very difficult to deal with the quality of their deliveries, if nothing else. You know, so once upon a time you'd go into a shop and I'd say I'd like a new suite, and they were quite happy to say, yeah, it's sort of like 20 or 30 weeks before you can have it. But Amazon and other businesses have changed all that. And that was seen, I think, in the retail business as being another difficulty that we've got to cope with rather than another opportunity. And as both of you have said, COVID has brought a gift to organisations like Amazon. Any of the online sales organisations can continue to sell stuff without us getting out of our chairs. Will we go back to the high street? Well, what service have we had from the high street? We all like shopping at, people used to like shopping at Marks and Spencer's and the like, but many of the top shops and the others are just disappearing because they've become a financial football for somebody's drive to build himself a bigger yacht. It's not going to help.
And it's also about thinking about the customer experience. There's a store in Birmingham where they have made a point of looking at the customer experience, not just selling things, but actually looking at the customer experience. And in fact, I think there's a whole floor that's turned into various types of food outlets, so that it's not just one restaurant, but various different ones. So how can the store become a destination for, as well as having a retail operation? And you have to realize that in many ways that actually meeting some sales assistant, you can actually get some information that helps you with your choice. But I think that's got to be part of a total retail experience these days. And many years ago, I went to somewhere in Wales. I've forgotten where it was now. I think it was, no, anyway. And they virtually banned the supermarkets to keep all the little retail shops that in their high street. We were all individually owned and were providing very special experiences for their customers, and that was was really important to them in their small town. So it's the customer experience that counts, and if it's lousy, then people won't go back.
Yeah, good point. Thank you. We've just got a couple more. Go on.
So I was going to say, do we have time for any more questions, or do you want me to pop up the slides for the poll?
We've just got a couple of slides. I'd like to share the Mentimeter bit.
Should we do that now, or do you want to take a couple more questions?
This is moving. Oh, sorry. This is moving on a bit. Start from the current slide. We've set up a Mentimeter using the Mentimeter survey type of thing, tool. And we've put together a series of questions. It's divided into two sections. The first section is broad, big quality questions about your organisation. And the second half is questions of how Mozo, the sort of Mozo questions about how the thinking behind Mozo might help with your organisation. You can get to this link. Let me see. There's a link there at the bottom to our quality video, or sorry, a Mozo video on the CQI website. You could take a photo of that if you can't, if nothing else, and get that link to CQI and watch the video about Mozo. The other thing you can use is the QR code, which on your mobile phone will get you a link to the Mentimeter. Oh, crumbs. I'm sorry. Back up. We'll get you a link to the Mentimeter website, and there's a series of questions in there, which basically you're scoring answers to questions or putting some free field ideas against questions, which are supposed to help you think about your organisation and how it might improve based on your knowledge of it. And if you share those with us, we'll try and make an assessment overall of the things that you're thinking about, and we'll publish them again and ask CQI to share them with you all as you've been delegates at our meeting. I hope that helps. We think the Mozo model is a first step towards, or is a useful step towards thinking about your organisation in detail and making things better. The other thing I'd recommend is getting involved with us. If you'd like to join the committee, we prepare events like this. We're trying to improve our techniques to prepare webinars for the future. And I have to say thank you to all the guys in DemSig, because in all the years that I've worked, the opportunity to go and talk to people at CQI in the Deming Special Interest Group has helped me solve some of our problems, and given me a new way of thinking about some problems that I was encountering, have encountered, and it's been very valuable to me. So let Caroline Whitson know if you'd like to join the committee. And perhaps a final thank you to you as the delegates who attended our presentation. Thank you for that, and joining our AGM. And thank you again to all the CQI, to all the DemSig committee members for your efforts over the years. Thanks very much indeed. And goodbye.